Hello everyone, welcome to our video presentation for assignment 3. This video is presented to you by Arbel Jones, Leilani Hill, Justine Todd, and Kevin Cathy. Let's get to it. Today we're going to talk to you about the subject of information processing as described and discussed within chapters 9 and 12 in our Infants, Children, and Adolescents textbook. Before we move on to the next slide, let's quickly define what information processing is within the realm of child education. Information processing is essentially how individuals perceive, analyze, manipulate, use, and remember information. Think about a simple math problem like 2 plus 2. You quickly came to the answer of 4 versus having to really write anything down or give it much thought, most likely. Why do you think that is? It is because of several reasons. 1. You might have learned that 2 plus 2 equals 4 over the course of many elementary classes. 2. You experience having 2 things before adding 2 more of the same things to know that it's 4 on previous occasions. That's showing your proficiency in memory and analysis skills. That's at the core of what information processing is. Now let's dig a little deeper by defining more terms related to the subject.
One element involved with information processing is called executive function. The textbook describes this function as the means by which children handle increasingly difficult tasks that require the integration of working memory, inhibition, and flexible thinking, which in turn support gains in planning, strategic thinking, and self-monitoring of behavior. This function occurs at a time in middle childhood when the development of the prefrontal cortex, which is part of the brain that regulates behavior and greatly contributes to someone's overall personality, is working more than it ever has before. Executive function looks different in children who have attention deficit disorder, which is, in plain English, a learning disorder in which the brain is in overdrive. So in kids with ADHD, their executive function is deficient because the brain cannot slow down enough to work properly, causing symptoms such as limited impulse control and low attention span. Children that do not have learning disabilities and have been brought up in an environment that caters to their cognitive skills will show proficiency with their executive function by controlling their behaviors such as displaying patience and not acting out when they're uncomfortable. Another element involved with information processing is working memory capacity. The textbook describes this element as having increased efficiency of overall thinking. Chronic stress can cause impairments in the brain, which can affect your efficiency of memory. For instance, if you're not good with conflict and someone's shouting at you and asks you an easy question, have you ever been able to not answer it because you're stressed? Or think of if you've ever acted in a play. You memorized your lines for months, you've practiced, but when the day comes to perform, you can't remember a line and you forgot on the spot. And why is that? It's because of the stress of the situation. So now think about being a kid in a bad environment 24/7. Your working memory is not going to be working at optimum levels. Myelination, which we know is the development of nerve fibers, occurs within working memory capacity in middle childhood. And this is where the myelin sheaths are shed because they're no longer needed due to reinforced formations of the fibers. So think of it as like a flower plant being pruned to only produce the best and prettiest flowers. Another element involved with information processing is memory strategies. So the textbook describes this element as the deliberate mental activities that are used to store and retain information. Some notable terms for this element include rehearsal, which is the repeating of information to oneself. And then another one is organization, which is the act of grouping related items together to reinforce the ability to recall information. For instance, if someone asked you to name a horror movie you like, you could access the category of horror movies in your brain and come out with a title pretty quickly. And you can do this because your brain has grouped these related movies into somewhat of like a file cabinet in your brain. And then elaboration, which is creating a relationship between multiple pieces of information that are not members of the same category. So now we want to talk about how these elements compare to early childhood and middle childhood. So all these elements that we've talked about thus far occur at a more proficient level with children in middle childhood. They do also occur with kids in early childhood, but kids at that age are at the novice level. For kids that are in the age group of 6 to 11 years old in regards to executive function, they're going to have a higher impulse control and longer attention span. For instance, they may not act out as much if their parent says no when they want a toy at the store. Whereas, you've probably been to a toy store here and there, children ages 3 to 5 are going to throw a tantrum, or they're may not going to be listening for too long. So you'll notice the difference that in preschool, there's constant changes of activities in the day's schedule almost every 15 to 30 minutes. Whereas in elementary school, they could be doing one subject for over an hour. And this is because younger kids don't have the attention span that older kids do. So in regards to working memory capacity, kids in middle childhood need less time to process information and have expanded language capabilities. For instance, you can explain to them a 5-step process that can likely accomplish with ease. But for kids 3 to 5, they have difficulties with processes that have more than 3 steps. For instance, you could tell a 10-year-old, hey, get ready for school, and the 10-year-old knows all the steps involved. However, for a 4-year-old, you will likely need to spell out the steps as they're going, such as, get your shirt, put it on, followed by, and now, get your shoes and put those on. In regards to memory strategies, kids ages 6 to 11 become more proficient with using taxonomical classification, which essentially is the hierarchy of specifics of categories. Children are better able to quickly identify the importance of things over others. Younger kids, however, are more prone to reacting to everything equally. For instance, if a 3-year-old hurts their toe, whether it's major or minor, they may ask for a Band-Aid because that's what they've been taught to do when anything hurts. But when a 10-year-old hurts their toe, they may say, ow, but move on with no care afterwards because they realize it's not serious. Also, kids in middle childhood are able to grasp new concepts by incorporating what they've learned into their developed sense of selves, whereas younger kids simply learn directly from what they're told, and it's harder for them to grasp new ideas since they're more of a blank slate and don't have something in the past to relate the new concept to.
From the lens of Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theory, which centers around the idea that a person's personality developments through 8 stages, we could see that kids in middle childhood are at the 4th stage of the 8 stages of psychosocial development. The 4th stage consists of the struggle between industry and inferiority. Industry means being productive upon receiving an evaluation of one's work. In other words, competence. Inferiority means becoming discouraged, feeling inferior or incompetent upon receiving an evaluation of one's work. Through the lens of Erikson's psychosocial development theory, a kid who is more on the industry side would exhibit the memory strategy to create meaningful associations with unrelated information. A kid who is more on the industry side would also be considered a quick problem solver in regards to working memory capacity. On the flip side, through the lens of Erikson's psychosocial development theory, a kid who is more in the inferiority side would exhibit a lower executive function, meaning that they would likely not be as competent in regulating their behavior. They would also likely be more timid due to lack of self-confidence, affecting their working memory capacity by not using much language. Let's take a look at an activity that supports information processing. Activities like story circles foster the development of information processing capacities in children in middle childhood. Story circles prompt students to collectively create, through responsive contributions, a storyline or narrative. In a story circle, students integrate their ability to recall and serialize information using working memory strategies, and executive functions, with their ability to produce original creative work out of that recall. In this activity, students are placed in a circular ring, either in chairs, standing, or seated on a rug, depending on the age of the students and the assessment made by the teacher. Initially, the teacher, also part of the circle, might be the one to commence the exercise by opening the story with a single line and an accompanying action or movement. For example, she might say, "Once upon a time, there was a large bear who lived in the forest," and hold her arms up like a bear. The student to her left would pick up the storyline, repeating her sentence and movement, and then adding his or her own. So they might say, "Once upon a time, there was a large bear who lived in the forest. One morning, he woke up very, very hungry," adding perhaps a motion of rubbing one's tummy. This continues around the circle, with each child repeating the verbal and physical actions of his or her classmate, segments in sequential order and then adding his or her own to the developing story. Thus, each child must recall each segment of the story, contributed by classmates, in the correct order, and then, with only momentary contemplation, add to the story in a logical manner. The activity continues until either a student forgets or reorders components of the storyline, or until the circle is successfully completed. The younger the students, the less complex the story need be. Story circle activities support physical, cognitive, and social and emotional developmental domains in children. Cognitive development is supported by the activities demand that students utilize information processing capacities, cultivating central executive function, working memory, and memory strategies through the recall of sequential information provided by classmates. Additionally, students must use logic and creativity to make their own contribution to the story, and they must do so while thinking on their feet, so to speak. Linguistically, students exercise comprehensive and productive language, expand vocabulary, and practice grammar. Physical development is supported through creation of and reenactment of the physical movements and motions accompanying the storyline. Whether the motions are small, using only hands and fingers, or large, like jumping or turning, students are learning to use and challenge their bodies in a variety of ways. Social and emotional development is supported through the act of collective creation with peers in a manner that is also a social game. Students must listen, react, respond, and collaborate. There is also the opportunity for laughter, surprise, expectation, and disappointment. Finally, because the students are developing a story together, they can explore self-expression both linguistically and physically.
The activity would take place in a classroom where the children are able to stay focused and still have fun. Story circles, or circle time, would provide a time for listening and help attention span, as well as helping communication and learning new skills. These fun activities encourage learning in a structured setting. It provides an open opportunity for social interactions. The story circle would last about 10 to 15 minutes, because while some children are ready for the story circle, some may not be able to sit still the whole time. Because they have short attention spans, it's good to give them a certain amount of time, depending on the age limit of the class. By planning activities based on the time frame, we know groups can stay focused. Their attention spans will become longer throughout the year. Story circles are a time for social interactions among the children. It helps develop relationships between kids through engaging and fun activities. Story circles are also appropriate settings for reviewing classroom rules, like how to treat classmates. We would say this activity is safe because the students are in a setting that they are used to, with a trusted adult engaging in an activity to help them develop in many ways. Thank you everyone for letting us present our topic of information processing to you